on PrimeTime, Germany's Chancellor begins his first visit to Beijing as trade tensions deepen. A widening economic imbalance and strategic competition now define one of Europe's most important and delicate relationships. So can Berlin steady the scales? A very good evening. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is in Beijing on a two-day visit aimed at reshaping economic relations with China. Well, his talks with President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang come at a time of growing trade tensions and increasing scrutiny in Europe over economic dependence on China.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Beijing on Wednesday as part of Merz's two-day visit aimed at recalibrating economic ties between the world's second and third largest economies. China was Germany's largest trading partner last year, but Berlin has raised concerns over widening trade imbalances and growing pressure on its manufacturing sector. Meeting Merz in Beijing, President Xi called for stronger strategic communication and urged both sides to uphold multilateralism and free trade amid what he described as profound global transformation. Xi said stable China-Germany relations carry broader implications for Europe and the global economy.
The more turbulent and intertwined the world becomes, the more China and Germany need to enhance strategic communication and increase strategic mutual trust. We should leverage the stability and vitality of China-Germany relations to promote cooperation in China-EU relations and seek common ground for a turbulent world.
Merz also held talks with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, where both sides agreed to expand cooperation in trade, green transition, and emerging sectors such as artificial intelligence and biopharmaceuticals. Beijing said economic ties between the two countries could see new opportunities over the next 5 years as China enters a new development planning cycle. Speaking after the talks, Merz acknowledged the scale of Germany's trade imbalance with China and said it needed to be addressed through dialogue.
The trade deficit between Germany and China currently stands at more than 80 billion euros. Since 2020, within just 5 years, it has quadrupled. This dynamic is not healthy. We are therefore seeking ways to reduce this trade imbalance, which is currently to our disadvantage, while recognizing that our close ties also create opportunities.
Merz is accompanied by senior executives from major German companies, including Volkswagen and BMW, underscoring the economic stakes of the visit.
Well, my first guest tonight is Michel Zubenica, CEO of Winning Strategy. He's joining us from Munich in Germany. Michel, very nice to see you. Thank you for joining us on PrimeTime. Let's start with the obvious then. Do you think Germany's edging away from Washington, or is this just smart diplomacy?
First of all, I would not say that Germany is moving away from Washington, because Germany still depends on the United States for security, energy, and also the economy. The American market is actually still very important for German companies. What is different in Germany's approach today is need for greater independence in all areas. If Germany and EU wants to be independent players on the global stage, they need to diversify their parts. This means Germany must look for partners outside the transatlantic bloc, and China is certainly one of them. So since it's Germany's most important trading partner is also China, I think it's very, very important, this visit of Chancellor Merz.
Yeah, clearly, as you say.
On the question directly, I would say this is smart diplomacy, but also an economic necessity,
Yes.
Because German-Chinese economic relations are no longer the same as before. As you mentioned, they have changed, and mostly not in Germany's favor, unfortunately.
Yes, no, very interesting. And as you say, not necessarily perhaps edging away from Washington, but certainly broadening options out of, frankly, necessity. How is this broadening of the outlook being codified into a coherent plan on behalf of the Chancellor?
Yeah, the Chancellor Merz wants to be a leader of Europe, and considering the all geopolitical conditions now, Germany has to lead balanced diplomacy. But I would also warn that Germany is under economic pressure from China as well, like from the United States. 10 years ago, China was the main market for the German industrial products. However, by developing its own brands, especially in the car industry and machinery, China has become one of the biggest global competitors to the German companies. So Germany, unfortunately, rapidly losing ground in the Chinese markets, and its risk losing the European markets is as well in the future if nothing changes. So a good example is the decline in profits of big German corporations such as Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes. So at the same time, because sales are also falling in the US market, Germany must to do everything to keep and to protect its position in China and elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like the whole world wants China's attention at the moment. Has the Chancellor got sort of one or two key messages that you think he wants to try and land during his time in Beijing?
Yeah, so I think that, as I said, Chancellor Merz must do, dealing with the balance. So currently, Germany is behind both China and the United States economically, especially in the new technologies like AI. So it does not have a strong leverage to China. Also, until Germany strengthens its military and reforms the EU, it cannot speak about full independence. So this is balancing diplomacy that tries to protect Germany and Europe in the era of the major powers that seek dominance, obviously. So I think the crucial message will be, so we want, as the Germans, to have a collaboration with China, but the rules must to be equal for everyone, for all the companies from Germany, for Europe, and also for the companies from China, because subsidiaries and the state of the China leading China's companies to leverage over the German companies, and it's not fair. But at the same time, Germany has to keep the good economic relations with China. China is still the most important market for the German companies. So that compromise and balance, collaboration, but not going to the losing economic battles. So that's the most important message of the Chancellor Merz.
Michelle, you mentioned earlier that Chancellor Merz wants to be seen as the leader of Europe. In terms of this visit, to what extent is he speaking on behalf of Germany versus speaking on behalf of the EU, do you think?
Yeah, it's very good question, and it's crucial. I think Germany is not acting alone. So I think this is the voice of Europe, actually, because this time is the time for European unity. And Europe has shown, for example, in the case of Greenland, that it can be united and defend itself from the risks. So there is increasing discussion now about the need for European unity so that EU can remain a relevant geopolitical player. Regarding the China, it's very important that we recently saw the British Prime Minister visit China and reach certain agreements. Also, French President Emmanuel Macron has for some time supported deeper cooperation with China. So this is, I think, common stance of Europe. And also, what is also important, we have seen Canada, because of poor relations with the Trump administration, looking for solution through political, partnership with the European Union, but also with economic cooperation with China. So Germany, I think, because it's a leading European economy, it's a nature role to lead Europe. And I think the Chancellor Merz now is the most stronger leader in Europe compared with the French president or UK prime minister.
Yes.
And I think this is the voice not only of the Germany, as I said, it's also a voice of the Europe and all those Western countries which want to be to maintain the world order like before.
Yeah, as you say, Michel, he may well be the strongest in Europe at the moment. Still not immune to political risk, though. And in terms of that, do you think there is a risk of annoying the US? And also domestically, you know, he doesn't have an absolutely perfect mandate from the electorate. Not everybody likes him. Do you think there's a risk both in terms of the US, but also at home in Germany?
Yes, I think this visit carries some risk because the U.S. administration will not easily accept its allies deepening ties with China, which is America's main competitor for global leadership. However, considering all the political, trade, and security pressures from the United States toward Europe, I believe Europe is prepared and will defend its place in the world. So this process will not be easy or short, but what is happening today is a wake-up call for Europe to find its own path. So as I said, Germany as Europe's leading economy power has special responsibility because its future will largely shape the future of Europe. And Chancellor Merz has helped restore Germany's international reputation. With some luck, I think positive results may be achieved. And, Germany is, and Europe, I think, deserves to be at the table and to have capacity to trade independent with all the countries all over the world. But it's not mean that Europe want to completely cut off ties with the United States because I said earlier that United States is still the key ally of the Europe in terms of the security, in terms of the economy, and in terms of the technology overall.
Michel, we thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the show with us.
Thank you for.
Okay, turning now from diplomatic efforts to economic outlooks, I'm joined by Duncan Wrigley. He's Chief China Plus economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, based in London, UK. Duncan, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show with us. Economically speaking, what does Germany need most right now from China?
Well, I think what Germany needs most right now from China is a stable partner. Germany would like China to import more from Germany to, reduce that yawning trade deficit it has with China. So, I think there'll be some agreements there, but realistically, that there's little room for much increase in Chinese imports from Germany, just because China's so competitive in making many of the things that Germany is good at, like automotive and chemicals.
Yeah, and from Beijing's side, I mean, whenever you see these images of the European leaders going to Beijing, often China just looks so powerful, so immovable in the face of negotiation efforts. Nevertheless, how important is Germany to China, do you think?
I think Germany is very important to China. China may look very strong from the outside, but in fact, its domestic economy is going for a sluggish moment. Investment is falling in many parts of the economy, consumption is sluggish, and China's quite reliant this year and coming couple of years on exports. And that means retaining good relations with many of its trade partners. And Germany plays such a key role in the huge European market that it makes it a very important partner.
And Mr. Wrigley, do you think that there's a grand plan here for China on behalf of Chancellor Merz, or is it more sort of tactical opportunism, looking to get a deal here and there where he can?
You know, I think both sides, both China and Germany, are responding to a very uncertain world. You know, it's shifting in economic terms towards this, I would say, multipolar world. You know, the US might like to define it as US versus China, but I think in reality, you have a number of strong areas, and Europe is one of those, and parts of the emerging market too. And so in this shifting, uncertain world, where obviously the US has demonstrated its ability to wield tariffs, for example, I think that the two sides are looking to strengthen ties and create stability in their trade and investment relations as a kind of ballast in this uncertain world.
Yeah, and just on that, do you think that President Xi also spots the geopolitical opportunity here when it comes to US tariffs, developing a stronger relationship with Europe's biggest economy?
Yeah, I'm sure President Xi sees the geopolitical advantage in developing stronger ties, economic ties with Germany, but, you know, on the political side, ties with Europe have been tense in recent years because of differences over human rights and a general geopolitical rivalry with the US. And I think there is an opportunity for China, which probably President Xi sees, which is through solidifying economic ties to also improve broader geopolitical ties with Europe.
And finally, Duncan, if deals are struck and we start to see some more announcements, which industries, which sectors do you think will win first?
Yeah, the most obvious sectors would be areas like autos. Both German car makers have a massive market in China, and Chinese electric vehicles are coming into Europe. Many people have observed. And then in the deeper industrial areas, chemicals, massive German investments in the Chinese chemical industry. And vice versa, China is exporting a lot of industrial materials and inputs into the German manufacturing sector. I think that's driving a lot of the increase in trade in recent years. So I'd expect to see some agreements in those areas. It'll be kind of firming up relations, probably, rather than massive breakthroughs.
Mr. Wrigley, very interesting stuff indeed. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Andy Mioch. Stay tuned. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Wall Street shaken to its very foundation.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Warm welcome back to Primetime, wherever you're watching. Now, Andy Mioch has joined us with the very latest business news stories. Andy, what have you got for us tonight?
Well, guys, some tech stocks are on the rebound ahead of a highly anticipated earnings report. Asian markets saw some record highs. There's some news on another major AI chip deal, and we have those details on that latest Paramount bid for Warner Brothers. So let's get into it. As Wall Street braces for AI giant Nvidia's earnings report after the bell on Wednesday, shares of U.S. software companies that entered into partnerships with AI startup Anthropic helped lead a rebound in the sector that has been hammered by fears about the disruptive impact of artificial intelligence.
US software companies got a boost Tuesday from one of their perceived rivals, an artificial intelligence firm. AI startup Anthropic announced partnerships with Salesforce's Slack division, DocuSign, and others to develop new tools that could help with investment banking, wealth management, and HR tasks. The stocks got a lift after being hammered by fears about the disruptive impact of AI. Shares of Salesforce climbed nearly 4% in Tuesday afternoon trading, while DocuSign was up about 2.5%. The software sector fell to a 10-month low on Monday, after Citrini Research laid out a 2028 scenario where unemployment rises to 10.2%, triggered by layoffs as artificial intelligence rapidly supplants software and delivery applications. A week-long sell-off earlier this month wiped out about $1 trillion in market value on Wall Street that analysts dubbed Software-mageddon and hurt sectors spanning from software to logistics companies on both sides of the Atlantic and India.
In the Asian markets, South Korea and Japan stocks hit record highs amid gains in the region following that tech-driven rally on Wall Street. Let's have a look.
South Korean shares jumped past the 6,000 level for the first time on Wednesday as chip makers Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, as well as Hyundai Motor, surged to record highs on artificial intelligence hopes. The benchmark Kospi closed up 114.22 points, or 1.91%, at 6,083, after rising as much as 2.93% during the session. Japan's Nikkei share average climbed to another record, driven by a surge in tech-related stocks and waning expectations of an imminent policy rate hike after new central bank board member nominations. The benchmark Nikkei 225 index rose 2.2% to close at 58,583, after rising as much as 2.7%. The broader topics gained 0.7% at 3,843.
There's more AI news. Meta Platforms has agreed to buy $60 billion worth of artificial intelligence chips from the U.S. semiconductor company Advanced Micro Devices. The 5-year deal involves Meta buying 10% of the California chip company in a similar arrangement to a partnership struck between OpenAI and AMD last year.
Advanced Micro Devices said on Tuesday it has agreed to sell up to $60 billion worth of artificial intelligence chips to Meta Platforms over 5 years, in a deal that allows the Facebook owner to purchase as much as 10% of the chip firm. AMD had signed a similar pact with OpenAI last year, which was hailed as a vote of confidence in its chips and software, significantly boosting its stock price, while Meta has separately struck a deal with NVIDIA to buy millions of AI chips. AMD announced it will supply 6 gigawatts worth of chips to Meta, starting with 1 gigawatt of the company's forthcoming MI450 flagship hardware in the second half of this year. For reference, 1 gigawatt is enough to power roughly about 750,000 homes on average.
In the auto industry, luxury car maker Aston Martin is to cut another 500 jobs, reducing its workforce by a fifth. The new reduction comes after 170 jobs were cut at the start of last year.
Aston Martin said on Wednesday it will cut another 20% of its workforce after the luxury car maker's annual profit came in worse than expected amid weak demand and tariff pressures. The second round of job cuts confirm a brutal year for Aston Martin, which has been hit by a US quota-based tariff system it described as extremely disruptive, alongside extremely subdued demand in its key Chinese market. The company's consistent struggle to generate cash and manage its $1.87 billion debt pile has continued to weigh on performance despite repeated capital injections. Best known as the car brand driven by James Bond, the luxury automaker said it expects further cash outflows in 2026, though it anticipates an improvement thereafter.
Next up, drink maker Diageo cut its annual sales and profit forecast for the second time in 4 months and slashed its dividend, as its first results under a new CEO showed weak US and Chinese demand, still weighing on the world's biggest spirits maker.
And then we let that pour, lovely.
Diageo, the world's biggest spirit maker, cut its annual sales and profit forecast for the second time in 4 months on Wednesday. Weak US and Chinese demand continued to hamper the Johnnie Walker whiskey and Guinness beer maker. In its first results under new boss Dave Lewis, it slashed its dividend. Lewis cited poor US performance reflecting pressure on disposable income. US sales declined 9.3%, with sales of tequilas, such as Don Julio, which has been an important driver of growth, sliding by almost a quarter. It declared an interim dividend of 20 cents per share, down from 40.5 cents a year ago. Diageo said it now expects 2026 organic sales to fall 2% to 3%.
And finally, Warner Bros. Discovery said that Paramount Skydance's revised bid for the entire company, including its cable networks, could be preferable to Netflix's deal for its studio and streaming business. The updated offer raises the purchase price to $31 a share from $30.
Warner Bros. Discovery on Tuesday reopened the door to a takeover by Paramount Skydance. That is after Paramount raised its offer for the studio to $31 per share. The intense bidding war for the firm behind Batman and Harry Potter has reached fever pitch, with the board signalling that Netflix may lose its place as the preferred suitor. In its revised bid, Paramount also raised the termination fee it would pay should the deal fail to gain regulatory approval to $7 billion, up from $5.8 billion. It also agreed to pay Warner shareholders 25 cents per share per quarter for every quarter beyond September 30th that the deal does not close. The rival bidder also agreed to contribute more equity should banks raise concerns about Paramount's ability to finance the deal when it closes. Warner's board said it has not determined whether the revised proposal is superior to a merger with Netflix, but said directors would give it further consideration. Should a superior deal emerge, Netflix has 4 business days to revise its offer. The streaming giant has offered $27.75 per share in cash for the movie and television studios, its catalogue and HBO Max streaming service.
Well, that's all for the business brief tonight. Back to you, Guy.
Lovely stuff. Thanks very much, Andy. Great as always. Thank you. Okay, after the break, we'll take a closer look at how Russia's influence in the South Caucasus may be shifting and the administrative machinery shaping that change. Stay with us.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Shaken to its very foundation.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Well, a very warm welcome back to Primetime. We had a few technical difficulties wanting to show you a very interesting film that we have made about Mr. Sergei Kirilenko and his influence across the region. He, of course, is a Russian administrative architect of many of the things that have both been seen and unseen beneath the surface of politics in the region. But what I can provide for you is, in some ways, the next best thing. A News's Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Orkan Amashov, is with me to discuss the film the findings and all of the interesting connotations around it.
Thank you very much for this gratifying introduction. So grateful to you.
Let's start with this then, the summary. Do you sense that Russia is actually stepping back from the South Caucasus, or is it just a short-term reprieve because they're occupied, or some might say occupying, elsewhere?
They're both occupied there, and they're occupying the place that Ukraine at this precise moment in time. Yes, there is a school of thought, Guy, that as long as Russia is very much invested in the process happening in Ukraine, as long as the Ukraine occupation is underway, they will be busy there. And naturally, they will not be able to allocate enough resources in order to maintain their position in the South Caucasus. I think it's a solid position and it's a well-substantiated position. But Russia is quite resourceful in many ways. In terms of their soft power, they're able to meddle in the internal affairs of constituent countries in this region. I agree with that, but it's not the entire picture. Basically, Russia has been in decline in this region in terms of its footprint over the past few years. And I think Azerbaijan and Armenian, initially back in 2020 war, Second Karabakh War, deprived Russia of that fundamental ability to navigate within these two countries as a peacemaker and influence both of them. Because that conflict, Karabakh conflict, basically deprived both Azerbaijan and Armenia to deal with some other essential things, very, very central to their national interests. And conflict was very exhausting for both countries, and it was giving Russia fundamental leverage. And Russia was not on the winning side when the war ended, although of course, 10 November Declaration was signed in Moscow. Russia had the presence, and Russia had according to Article 9, Russia had according to that particular provision, that Zenga's recorder should have been controlled by Russians, not by infrastructure known as Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. But still, that decline was happening, and of course, naturally, September operation in 2023 and the subsequent withdrawal of Russian troops from Karabakh meant at the time, back in April 2024, that Azerbaijan was only a country with no Russian footprint in the region. As long as Armenia is concerned, Armenia, after realizing that there was absolutely no point in terms of relying on Russia against Azerbaijan, because their dependence on Russia was ultimately based on that expectation that in the case of active military confrontation with Azerbaijan, Russia will help. Russia did not help the way they were expecting, and this gave rise to frustration, and that frustration made them rethink their position. And they eventually, under the circumstances, came to the conclusion that peace deal with Azerbaijan and the Turkish-Armenian normalization are the two fundamental things they need to pursue. So naturally, Armenia is diversifying away from Russia presently, and Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process and subsequent Turkish-Armenian normalization are important considerations to be borne in mind. As long as Georgia is concerned, it's a bit more complicated, of course. Everybody now, in particular Western analysts, describe the current incumbent government, Georgian Dream, as being pro-Russian. I think it's not as black and white. 20% of Georgian territory is currently being occupied by Russia, and there will be no resumption of diplomatic relations between Tbilisi and Moscow as long as that is happening. Therefore, Russia is limited. There's 3 countries in this region. With Azerbaijan, they signed back in Moscow February 2022, just before the war, declaration on allied interaction. But in real terms, Azerbaijan's ally is Turkey. This is a treaty ally of Azerbaijan. And after Aktau plane crash, Azerbaijan had the expectation that Russia will apologize. Russians did not apologize. In fact, they engaged in a degree of shilly-shallying of some sort, according to Azerbaijani sources, of course. And therefore, with Azerbaijan, relations are not really good. With Armenia, Armenia is diversifying away. With Georgia, because of 20% occupation, relations cannot go the way it could have gone. So basically, if you look at those bilateral relations, Russia is not in a good position. But the question, back to your original inquiry, the premise of that your inquiry, that if they manage to achieve a certain form of peace arrangement in Ukraine with the sanctions in relation to Russia being lifted, what will happen? Will they be able to come back? Well, I don't necessarily think they will come back with full force, but this is something to be borne in mind for the future, just in case, of course.
It's very interesting to see this at the moment because, as you say, Ukraine is not the whole story. We've got a much more muscular United States, a country that wants to do business with Azerbaijan and the wider region. Turkey coming into play in a more overt and enhanced relations right across the region. And then you've also got on the other side a China that is not only economically powerful, but also politically pragmatic. This is not a China that is drenched in ideology, as perhaps it has been in previous generations. So do you get a sense that with all of that Russia is becoming more and more isolated?
But Russia is a diminishing power. It's a power in decline. 40 years ago, this territory was part of the Soviet Union. In effect, it was part of the Greater Russia. During the 90s, during that decade, these independent countries emerged, but Russia was the ultimate arbiter. It would have been absolutely impossible to do anything without Russian acquiescence. Even Azerbaijan was negotiating with Western partners in the early 90s. It was vital to take into account Russian interests. But Azerbaijani leadership back then, of course, did take into account Russian interests by means of acknowledging but also limiting. That was the genius of the administration led by the President Heydar Aliyev back in the 90s. This region needed some time in order to diversify away. And Russia is not necessarily inherently bad actor if they decide to change their approach to the regional affairs. If they refuse to follow the principle of let's have a conflict and control that conflict, and by means of controlling the conflict dominate the landscape there, if they move away from that policy, if they adapt to the realities created here as a constructive actor, they will have their own stake. So we're not really treating Russia as an inherently bad actor which will never be able to reform, but we're looking at what it has done over the past decades, what it is likely that they will be doing from now on, and on the basis of those elements we are gauging their role, and we are predicting what they're capable of in the fullness of time. If to go back to regional dynamics, we talked about Turkey. I think US presence now has assumed a particularly vital importance. Azerbaijan has signed strategic charter with the United States. This is very important. There are some defense elements to that. It's not a security guarantee. Azerbaijan does not need security guarantee from the United States. Azerbaijan's vital security guarantee is associated with Turkey. Back in June 2021, Shusha Declaration was signed, which entails Article 5 style protection of related to mutual protection. So if any attack on Azerbaijan means attack on Turkey, and any attack on Turkey, by the way, means attack on NATO country. So Azerbaijan and NATO is led by United States. So Azerbaijan's security guarantee here is self-contained, self-sufficient,
multi-layered,
and also multi-layered because connected to Turkey, and Turkish connection also gives rise to wider NATO connection with US and Britain and other actors being involved. In the case of Armenia, it's a bit different because Armenia is part of the Russia-led Collective Security Treaty Organization. Their participation there is not particularly meaningful at this juncture, but they have not yet left that organization. And as I understand, on the basis of the latest trip by US Vice President J.D. Vance, which you observed very closely yourself, whilst being there, when two leaders were delivering their remarks, this condition was presented to Armenian side as a very important one. Get rid of the membership in that particular organization. But Armenia's fundamental problem is the Eurasian Economic Union, because Armenia is intrinsically connected with Russia-dominated economic landscape, and they're benefiting from it. ENU's documentary regarding Shadow Fleet and also related to Vardanyan are revealing those parts. Armenia needs to get off. It is not the case that Armenia needs to sever relations with Russia completely. It needs to diversify away by means of increasing non-Russian elements in order to be less dependent on Russia.
Can they do it, Orkan? I mean, you have got as good a view of the geopolitics of this region as anyone. Can they do it? Can they, with the right support, the right help, the right encouragement, can they wean themselves off this Russian relationship that has been so interconnected, interwoven for so many years?
They can wean themselves off that dependency, provided they have a peace deal with Azerbaijan, they increase economic interaction with Azerbaijan, and provided, it's very important, the Turkish-Armenian normalization does reach its logical conclusion. Only under those circumstances they will be able to really get rid of that dependency. Russia will still be an important actor and player. Economically they're connected. I mean, when it comes to Armenia's energy needs, a substantial part of it comes from Russia, and there's nothing wrong about it. You need to have good economic relations with all your regional neighbors, including Iran, by the way. But the dependence on one particular actor is always a bad idea. Even if you're dependent on your closest neighbor, closest ally, Even that in itself, not a good thing, of course, as we have seen on a number of occasions, in particular in the example of the European Union, which is currently trying to get rid of the dependence on Russian oil and gas resources. Russia was reliable for them 2 decades ago, and now, of course, naturally circumstances have changed. Regarding Georgia, the situation is far more complicated. You asked a specific question: can they really, genuinely get rid of that? Well, we've seen examples of Russia-Azerbaijani-Armenian limited economic interaction via third-party countries. As we remember, a few months ago, back in October, when President Aliyev was in Astana, Kazakhstan, he announced that Azerbaijan unilaterally lifted all the restrictions regarding the transit of cargo to Armenia via Azerbaijan. And in November, we saw first elements of implementation. First, it was, I think, Kazakh wheat, which was transferred via Azerbaijan and then via Georgia to Armenia. And then Azerbaijani petrochemical products were transported from Azerbaijan via Georgia, with transit fees being paid, so Georgia is also benefiting from it financially, to Armenia. And this has had some impact on Armenian economy, perhaps negligible, but discernible. And it's absolutely vital that Pashinyan wins the next election. Of course, it's Armenia's internal matter. Of course, it's up to Armenian people to decide what kind of government they want to have. But the reality is that if Pashinyan fails, that drive to diversify away from Russia will be slackened. Peace agenda between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which achieved a particular momentum back in August 2025, will be slackened. So that election is a very geopolitical election, and the right result should emerge. I know, it's not a disrespect to electorate. They have to be able to make their own decision. But if they choose the Pashinyan's opponents, things may go in a way that they would not be able to appreciate in the fullness of time.
And do we know yet what the polls, what the indicators are suggesting? Is this going to be a close race, or do we think that Pashinyan has got a good chance of winning?
It doesn't look like a knife-edge election, but it's going to be pretty close. And on the basis of what we have heard, what we have seen, it seems he's going to win, and his popularity is not really rising. But not really in sharp decline either. It's sort of they managed to sort of managed to sustain his popularity. But I think when we say here in Azerbaijan that Pashinyan has to win, we also have to be very careful, because I imagine Armenian people do not like to be dictated from outside. They do not want to be told, this is a good choice for you. Although we understand that is a good choice, probably, because of the current situation, because of the possible implications and outcomes. But they should be allowed to make their own choice. When J.D. Vance was in Armenia, he effectively promoted Pashinyan's candidacy. He said that if I'm allowed to be a supporter of Prime Minister, I want to say that we fully support Prime Minister Pashinyan. We have Pashinyan received support from European Union very clearly. I mean, this entire talk about Armenia joining European Union in the fullness of time, of course, is not well substantiated. I mean, countries like Turkey have not yet joined European Union, despite the fact that they are economically and many other metrics actually far more advanced than Armenia. But it's a political sort of messaging that your future lies in Europe, and that gives Pashinyan internal, of course, confidence. Armenia's future lies in this region, and peace deal with Azerbaijan is absolutely vital. But good thing about this peace deal negotiations is that Armenia and Azerbaijan are not supposed to sign the deal now in order for Armenia to benefit from it. Certain limited economic interaction is already yielding some outcomes, and also, I suppose, beyond limited economic interaction, there's also international climate there. And President Aliyev and Pashinyan back in early February received jointly Zayed Award for Human Fraternity. It's very clear the entire world at large believes that it's a good thing for these two countries, and they're all supporting this process.
Okay, I was chatting to some of my daughter's friends not long ago. Very bright kids, studying international relations, lots of very interested in politics. And they were saying to me what Mr. Putin's strategy geopolitically is very obvious, even to teenagers. They said, well, what he does is he pretends to be looking after his own people and uses that as an excuse to invade other countries. When he's invading those other countries, he uses that to improve the polls with his domestic electorate. It's all very obvious. Now, no one is suggesting that the diplomats and the intelligence officers inside Moscow are not extremely clever. But do you think there's a sense in which that the world has sort of found him out to some degree?
To a certain degree, yes, in particular after what happened in Ukraine, because before February 2022, Russia had been perceived as a subtle player which would threaten but do not really carry out its threat. Instead of actually carrying out, it would get some benefits and dividends from not doing what it was supposed to do. Regarding this region, I think, South Caucasus, there's one particular element we should be very, very mindful about. This is the next elections in June, and to what extent Russia will employ soft power mechanisms, because everything is very, very clear. I think one particular adage says that what we learn from history is that we do not learn from history. Perhaps it's impossible on the basis of what happened 30 years ago to actually to get that adage and apply it to the current realities. But Russia, as I said, in my view and in view of many people that we have spoken to, is a declining power, but it should not be written off as yet. It's got enough resources. What they do now, probably, they are in decline politically in this region, and they're managing this decline. They don't want to be reactionary. When Azerbaijan and Armenia signed a joint declaration in Washington, naturally they were not happy. Naturally they were disgruntled, but they said that, well,
they dare not express that publicly.
Absolutely not. Maria Zakharova's the statements, they are always very well, nicely calibrated regarding Armenia's connectivity agenda, regarding Armenia's desire to reduce Russian control and ownership in Caucasus railway network, which effectively controls Armenia's entire railway system. Maria Zakharova said that we've contributed massively, we invested, we also did not do anything against competitiveness, so do not be ungrateful to us. But you can see that they are unhappy because basically they're losing their clout. Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, it's a railway connection inside Armenia, and it should have been under control of Russia under the normal circumstances, but Russia failed to be constructive, they lost that clout, America is present there, and they're losing gradually. And Russia economically is not viable enough to invest. I mean, we wouldn't be able to say the money is no object, is a principle for them. It is a challenge for them actually to invest in this part of the world the way they did before, because Armenia was completely reliant on Russia before the war of 2020. So in view of all of the things, they need to exercise the art of managed decline. So but when we talk about managed decline, they still have certain resources, and soft power is one of them. To what extent that particular gentleman, whose name is Sergei Kirilenko, former Prime Minister of Russia, when he emerged back in 1998, when Yeltsin, former Russian president, was not really he emerged as potential successor to Yeltsin, and then he failed, and Mr. Putin replaced him later in 1990. So they've been working together since that very period. And Mr. Kirilenko is not a public person, he's not an electable figure, but he's a shrewd administrator, and one of his responsibilities as a first deputy head of the presidential administration of Russia is to deal with soft power technologies in this region. Say, the occupied territories of Georgia, 20%, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, Armenia are part of his sort of domain as a head of that directorate in the Kremlin. And naturally, we will see what will happen, but it is very clear when it comes to implementation of Russian foreign policy agenda in different parts of the Caucasus, this gentleman is a key person. And will they interfere? Will they, by means of using information technologies, create a situation wherein Pashinyan will be forced to do things that he does not want to do? Time will show. As things stand now, it is unlikely they will achieve their purpose. And I imagine Russia, for all of its peculiar characteristics, will be acting reasonably. You remember back in 2018 when Pashinyan came to power, many analysts were expecting that Kremlin would interfere and help the former Prime Minister, the gentleman Sarkisian. And they didn't. I think the reason why they didn't, not because they did not want to, because they realized the intervention would backfire. So, and I think that they will be guided by the same principle that our intervention will backfire, therefore their intervention will be limited.
And there's been quite a lot of backfiring recently with Ukraine, many other issues. We had a really interesting conversation with a Russian expert on the show last night. And one of the things that she was describing was this peculiar duality that exists amongst citizens in Russia at the moment, where people are very proud of their country, very proud to be Russian. But equally, there is a sort of a bubbling disquiet, she was telling me, about the positions that the country is taking in Ukraine, for example.
Yes.
But every country pretty much in the world is saying you were wrong for doing this. And only North Korea, Iran, Belarus perhaps are standing alongside them. That there is a sense now that they are so obviously on the wrong side of history that whether or not it's expressed publicly, there is a bit of disquiet now emerging.
Russia is a massive country, 145 million population. And substantially majority of them actually live in the European part and 40 million in the Asian part. I've not been to Russia for ages. I can't remember what was the last time I was there. I don't think I will be there anytime soon. But I think those people who've been to Russia recently, some of my colleagues and friends are telling me that there is a considerable chunk of society which feels absolutely righteous about their position. They feel that they are, in contrast to what you said about not being on the right side of history, they feel they're on the right side of history. They feel that they got this sort of sense of identity which is under attack. This is a sort of conservative, nationalistic identity, proper Russia. I don't know which percentage of the population thinks like this. I don't know.
But okay, within that percentage, what is their rationale? Do they just believe that 140 other countries have just been brainwashed, or coincidentally have all arrived at the wrong conclusion, or do they not even think about that?
I don't think they think about it that much, but I think they treat that this entire Western world, led by United States, deeply, inherently malicious and vicious. They believe that the world will collapse, something very catastrophic will happen if they do not do the right thing. They got the sense of civilizational mission, annexation of Crimea, and the lack of proper, decent reaction from the Western countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom. I think for those 8 years made them feel that they could get away with it. What is currently happening in Ukraine is a very good example of that. And President Trump is saying that, well, perhaps Ukraine must be forced into concessions. This effectively means that you can occupy a foreign country, people will criticize you, there will be certain resolutions against you, but then, because you're very powerful, you can actually legitimize those actions. But let me just be absolutely clear about what I said earlier. I don't know what percentage of Russian population thinks that. There are many reasonable, sound, future-oriented Russians. Probably we don't know the real number because they are incredibly frightened. But the reality is, before 2014, let's say before February 2020, Russia was a proper sort of part of the international system. Russian football supporters cannot see their national team in the World Cup, in the European Championship. They can't support their clubs. Russia is completely isolated. And Russians, I think, they love Europe. I mean, they love London, they love Paris, they love New York. There's no inherent disinclination towards Europe as such. There's a sense that we are equal to Europe. And I think the memory of 90s, when Russia was in a bad state, and the way perhaps it was treated by Western actors, made them feel that they need to be more proactive. But I think, it's not for me to say whether Russia is on the right side or the wrong side. I think effectively, entire human civilization, civilized world at large, believes that Russia is wrong regarding Ukraine, irrespective of what will be the outcome. But I think that at a certain stage there will be a moment when they will come to terms and there will be some sort of acknowledgement and lustration regarding what happened, and the price paid will be relatively exorbitant. I think that point will come, but we will see. We will see. It's a battle, it's a confrontation, and we all know that history is written by winners. And for Russia to write history, it should be winner, and that does not seem to be at all likely they will be winner.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Always an absolute joy to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the latest border clashes between Pakistan and Afghanistan and what's driving the renewed tensions. Do stay with us.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jake. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. One important note to fears. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we're recording November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent,
Almaty, Kazakhstan,
Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back to Prime Time. Now, Pakistani and Afghan forces clashed along their border on Tuesday, each blaming the other for starting the deadly violence. It comes just days after Pakistani airstrikes killed at least 17 people inside Afghanistan around midnight on Saturday, according to officials. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Tensions briefly flared along the border on Tuesday as Afghan and Pakistani forces exchanged fire in Nangarhar's Nazian district. The clash lasted several hours before subsiding, with no casualties reported. Both sides blamed each other for the confrontation. Pakistan maintains that its actions are aimed at armed groups it says are operating from Afghan territory, a charge Afghan authorities have consistently rejected as baseless. With tensions flaring at the border and diplomatic channels now engaged, the situation remains fragile. Amir Khan Muttaqi, the foreign minister of Afghanistan, held a telephone conversation with Rosemary DiCarlo, the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. According to the Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Muttaqi expressed deep concern over what he described as the targeting of civilians in Sunday morning's strikes. He called on foreign diplomats to visit the affected areas to verify his claim that no armed individuals were killed, despite Pakistan's assertions that militants were targeted. In a statement, the ministry said that over the past 4 years, similar Pakistani attacks have only harmed civilians, and that not a single armed individual claimed by Pakistan has been confirmed killed. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan has also confirmed civilian casualties, including 13 members of one family. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
Well, to help us understand the latest developments along the Afghan-Pakistan border, I'm delighted to be joined now by Umair Anas, Assistant Professor at Ankara Yildirim Bizayat University in Ankara. Professor, very good indeed to see you. Nice to have you on the show with us. Okay, let's start with the immediate picture then. We've seen the exchange of fire in Nangarhar, accusations from both sides. We've had confirmed civilian casualties. Just how serious is the situation at this point?
It is going to be a very serious situation right now, because I see this incidence of Pakistani attack on Afghanistan, airstrikes on Afghanistan, as an indication that the existing or ongoing dialogue between Afghanistan and Pakistan have almost collapsed. The Istanbul dialogue process, which was supposed to create a joint mechanism to address these issues, have not worked. So there is no verifiable mechanism between Islamabad and Kabul to make a joint effort to address each other's concern. As a result, I think this strike has happened. And in coming months, my fear is that such incidents will increase and hostilities will also increase. So it is complete kind of a collapse of trust between Islamabad and Kabul.
Now Pakistan are saying that they're targeting armed groups operating from inside Afghan territory. Afghan authorities, of course, are refuting this. From a neutral perspective, how do we make sense of who's telling the truth here?
The problem with the Taliban is that they still do not control many of the regions, and non-state actors are still free. So it will take time for Taliban to have their control on entire Afghanistan, and especially on the non-state groups which were earlier operating almost in collaboration, in cooperation with the Taliban. So it will be very difficult for Taliban to control these groups and to take any action on these groups, because they have been in cooperation with Taliban before the regime change in Kabul. So I think that Taliban needs some support and time, and for that Pakistan has to understand how exactly they can make a cooperation. But at the same time, I would like to make a point here that since Taliban have come to power, from that time, the cross-border attacks on Pakistan have indeed increased almost to fourfold. So Pakistani military is really afraid of the return of insurgency inside Pakistan, which was there like 7 years before. So because of this fear, I think the Pakistani government and the military is trying to take some actions which we are considering as unilateral. However, it is up to Taliban to offer some sort of joint mechanism to take joint action on the groups which Taliban and Pakistan both consider as hostile to them.
Yeah, and Professor, we've now got the UN involved, as we said earlier, confirmed civilian casualties. Do you think this now increases the pressure on both Kabul and Islamabad to make a change, come up with something different to sort of really shift how they deal with this crisis?
I think the role of the United Nations is important. However, I'm not much optimistic, because before that, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Turkey have played an active role to mediate between the two countries. And there were dialogue in Istanbul to find a solution. The crisis between the two governments in Kabul and Islamabad is really, really deep. And we can understand this crisis by just one indication, that the Afghan foreign minister has not visited Islamabad for so long time. Generally, if there is a crisis between two neighboring countries, foreign ministers from both sides, they establish immediate contacts and they visit each other and they find a solution bilaterally. And there have been so many third-party mediators in their case. However, the trust is still not found. So this reflects the ongoing crisis as a crisis of trust. The trust between the two governments is really absent at this time. And that's why my fear is that the United Nations may not be that much effective as much as maybe Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia might be. And I think that these countries should offer their good offices to mediate between the two countries.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, of course, as you've pointed out, we've seen these flare-ups many times before. In a sense, you could look at this and sort of take the view that it's turning into a problem that can't be solved. I mean, how does Islamabad look at this? What is their view of what's happening in Kabul? Do they assume that Kabul is complicit, or would they just make the accusation that they're incompetent and can't get control of insurgents?
Interesting part is that no country in the world knows Taliban as much as Pakistan. No country in the world knows Taliban better than Pakistan. That is the reality. So, and of course, Taliban also knows Pakistan very much, deeply, inside out. So we cannot say that these two sides do not know each other. They know each other very well. And they know how exactly the two sides function. So there should not be much difficulty between them to reach out and to find a solution. However, Pakistanis have become so much concerned that perhaps Taliban are inclined to find other sources of stability and military support from other neighboring countries, including India and Iran, and maybe other countries. So they are understanding that maybe in future they are going to sideline Pakistan from any process in Afghanistan, and that is the fear in Islamabad, and that's why they are exerting pressure on Taliban government to find a joint mechanism, to find a solution in which Pakistan is also properly involved inside Afghanistan. And for Pakistan, my understanding is that they think that the security in Afghanistan and stability in Afghanistan is directly related to security and stability inside Pakistan, because they have a large number of Pashtun population as well as Afghan population. And Afghanistan is not a foreign policy affair. It is also a domestic affair in Pakistani politics. So that's why they think that they should have an active role and a confident role in Afghanistan, which at this time they are missing completely. And they are trying to regain.
Finally, Professor, let's talk solutions then. I mean, if in theory were a ceasefire to be secured, were a lasting peace to be won, what mechanisms would have to come into play? What would the architecture of such an agreement need to look like?
Merely a ceasefire may not be effective. More important is to find a long-term solution. And the long-term solution is that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which the Islamabad consider as Khawarij and un-Islamic, they want that Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is not at all working from inside Afghanistan. So they want all of the wanted terrorists from Afghanistan, that Afghanistan should hand over them. Taliban say that they are not there. At the same time, they demand a joint mechanism, which has not been agreed upon yet. Such demands have to be considered between the two governments and to find a solution. However, as I said earlier, the problem with Taliban is that they have been working with these groups earlier before capturing Kabul. So it has been extremely difficult for the Taliban to take action against such non-state actors. And for that, they have to negotiate and they have to convince these groups to not to be hostile against Pakistan. And only by dialogue between the two governments and between Taliban and Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, a solution can be found. In Pakistan, what I understand is that right now, the military leaders in Pakistan and the civilian government both, they have a policy that they are not going to negotiate at all with Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. So as a result, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is also feeling completely isolated, and they are trying to build pressure on Pakistani government by increasing their attacks. And this is a situation where Taliban may have an opportunity. They can reach out the Taliban, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, and speak to them and kind of mediate between Islamabad and Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, so that they can stop their hostile activities against Pakistan.
Professor, we appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Thank you for being on the show with us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the 10th trilateral parliamentary meeting in Baku and what it signals for the South Caucasus and cooperation in the region. Do stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
A very warm welcome back to Primetime. Now, the 10th trilateral meeting of the Foreign Relations Committees of the Parliaments of Azerbaijan, Turkey and Georgia was held in Baku. Addressing the meeting, Turkey's Foreign Affairs Minister Fuat Oktay said peace and stability in the South Caucasus remain a priority for Turkey and voiced strong support for the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process. Participants also touched on regional connectivity projects and broader geopolitical developments, reaffirming their commitment to closer trilateral cooperation. Well, to discuss this trilateral meeting and what it signals for the South Caucasus, I'm joined now by A-News's Nigar Shirinova. Nigar, very good to have you here in the studio.
Hello, thank you so much
with
for
us.
having me.
Let's start with this trilateral meeting then, the constitution. Azerbaijan, Turkey and Georgia all gathering in Baku for the 10th time. What came out of it this time round?
So this is a very interesting and important topic to discuss. I'm very happy to be here and to discuss this. So this 10th trilateral meeting involving Azerbaijan, Turkey and Georgia it's not just symbolism, it's also reinforcing the regional cooperation model between these three countries and specifically in the region in the South Caucasus. From this meeting we can say that three main takeaways, three main elements which we can discuss. So first of all, it's definitely about how this meeting is 10th time happening and how it reinforces and supports the regional stability and prosperity in the South Caucasus. And also we can say that how the regional countries, Turkey and Georgia, how they are supporting the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So it's also signaling that it's really good that the regional countries in the South Caucasus, they support the stability in the region rather than confrontation. So this is another element. And also I would like to mention that in this meeting we also saw that the Turkey's support and back to Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process, how they support it. This is another important signal from the meeting. And second element I would definitely say about connectivity. As we already know, it's about the energy corridors, and we also can say that it's not about only the series and what is in the paper just meeting, it's also the practical outcomes. We can definitely speak about, show the middle corridor, and we can also speak about the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. So these all are the connectivity projects which are involving these regional countries, and also we can say that the strategic geopolitical positioning, how it connects the Caspian region to Europe. So it's also the connectivity is another important point here. And third, I would say that how this framework, how this meeting is institutionalized already, because it's 10th meeting happening. So we can definitely say that it's beyond just symbolism. So there is a really mutual cooperation, coordination between these three countries. And this would be a bit like different aspect, but I would like to also mention that there was another proposal by the European Union about the quadrilateral meeting format. We can say it was proposed by the Martekos, and there the interesting point is that it's Azerbaijan, Turkey, European Union and Armenia, and not Georgia. Georgia is excluded on that format. So we can say that in that format, it's also another aspect, another perspective, another connectivity projects approach. There, Georgia is excluded, but Armenia is in, and European Union. So we can say that it's not about, it's not mutually exclusive, but they're mutually reinforcing each other. So
it's very interesting, some question marks on some different perspectives on Georgia. However, the 10th time, as you say, this has happened. Now that suggests that this is more than just a series of meetings. This is a deeply entrenched relationship. Just give us a sense of how deep the relationship goes.
Yeah, so 10th time, it's absolutely very important because, as I already said, this framework, this meeting is already, we can say that, institutionalized. So if the countries that are coming together for 10th time to discuss something, and it's like 10th year, we can definitely say that like big projects are coming. And also it's not only about the theory, there are really outcomes of these meetings. The countries are working together on the extension of the regional connectivity, stability in the region, and also these countries, we can say that they have all economic interests in the region. So the shared economic interest, it boosts for working together, which is, as we can see from the practices, going very well.
And alongside the formalities, the main formalities of the meeting, Azerbaijan's Prime Minister, Mr. Asadov, held separate talks with Turkey's Foreign Affairs Committee Chair and former Vice President, Mr. Oktay. What stood out for you from that bilateral discussion?
So this is another important point here, which we definitely need to speak about, to emphasize here. So it really shows how the Turkey, specifically Ankara, is involved in this process. And we can also, to answer your question, I can say that it's about deepening economic ties between these countries, and also political connectivity, political common approach to the region interests. And we can also, we need to mention there that he is also the, he's not only the chair of this Foreign Affairs Committee, but he is also the former Vice President. So this is another important point which shows us that Ankara is really serious in this strategic framework, and about supporting this framework, and Azerbaijan, the region. So it's definitely needs to be emphasized here.
And trade and connectivity, subjects that have come up many times before. Did we hear about any more specific projects, any greater level of detail that might suggest exactly where that could be heading?
Yeah, they were discussed some, of course, every time the connectivity is one of the best topics, the hot topics to discuss, and the connectivity's new projects, middle corridor, Baku-Tbilisi cars, and all of this trade facilitation, the new infrastructure, new plans were discussed, and regional security issues were also touched and discussed upon. So these all were discussed, and new projects are coming up, as we can expect.
And just stepping back a little bit, there's an awful lot happening. The whole world seems to be looking at this region at the moment. What do you think this trilateral relationship says about where the region is going? There's clearly some positive stories, but it could take many different courses, I guess. What does this trilateral relationship suggest to us about the direction of travel?
Yeah, it's worth to mention that also that this trilateral format, which includes Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Georgia, we can see that these countries are in around the South Caucasus, in the South Caucasus, the region. This is also good that it's different than other formats, other meetings, because there is no external global actor here, so the regional countries, they can decide for themselves, which is good. And also it's a signal to the world, to globe, that really these countries are working together in the connectivity, infrastructure, trade, economy, and many other things, and they can decide for themselves, and the big projects are coming, the geopolitical importance, the middle corridor, and specifically now we can see the Russia-Ukraine war is continuing there, and Europe's, the southern gas corridor we can mention here. So it's very important region, we know this, and it connects it's west with east, and the middle corridor, Central Asia to Caspian, and from there to Europe through Georgia and Turkey. So this is very important, and it's definitely big. It signals to the world, and I can definitely say that this is really good, that the regional countries can come together for 10th time and to discuss, to agree on the mutual benefit, on their shared interests.
Nigar, We always enjoy having you with us in the Primetime studio. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, we check in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Stay with us. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Wall Street shaken to its very foundation.
We have a dependency on the Russian economy, as we do with any economy, because we currently import a large volume of goods.
Armenia has always been Russia's closest and best friend in every matter. But today, Russia has abandoned and dumped Armenia.
During the 2020 war, we were in strategic relations with Russia. Not only did they not help, but they didn't help even when requested.
They brought in gasoline from Azerbaijan, and the price dropped by 50 drams. When you fill a 20-liter tank, that is a saving of 1,000 drams. That is not a small amount of money for many people, especially for those living in the regions.
Azerbaijan? No, I wouldn't want that. Importing goods from Azerbaijan. Never.
After all, we all make mistakes. Armenian mistakes are no less significant. And it seems to me there is quite a lot of blood in or on our hands as well.
In my opinion, the Americans proposed this, the Trump route. It suits us, and our government has agreed because it really brings us a lot of benefit.
I am much more in favor, of course, of Armenia having closer ties with the West.
Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. So, a royal residence searched, an ongoing police investigation, and mounting pressure in Parliament. UK authorities have concluded searches at Royal Lodge as part of a misconduct inquiry involving Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But the fallout is spreading far beyond Windsor, from calls to release official files to fresh legal disputes in London. The political ramifications are growing. A News's Zainab Farizada picked up the story.
UK police have concluded search at Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's former residence in Windsor Great Park as part of an investigation into alleged misconduct in public office. Thames Valley Police began searching Royal Lodge in Berkshire after Andrew's arrest at Sandringham last Thursday, which coincided with his 66th birthday. He was detained for 11 hours on suspicion that he shared sensitive information with Jeffrey Epstein while serving as a UK trade envoy. Andrew was released under investigation and has denied any wrongdoing. Assistant Chief Constable Oliver Wright said officers had now left the Berkshire property, bringing the search activity to an end. He said the investigation remained ongoing and warned that further public updates were unlikely in the near term. The developments come after MPs backed the release of official files relating to Andrew's appointment as a UK trade envoy. The House of Commons approved the move anonymously without a formal vote. Trade Minister Sir Chris Bryant said the government will to release the documents as soon as is practicable and possible within the law. However, material linked to potential misconduct in public office could be withheld on prosecutors' advice. In Parliament, Bryant criticised Andrew's conduct, calling him rude, arrogant and entitled. He cited a visit to his constituency, saying Andrew insisted on travelling by helicopter, unlike Queen Elizabeth II, who travelled by a cart. He added that arrogance was not a criminal offence. Earlier this week, Australia and New Zealand backed plans to remove Andrew from the royal line of succession a move that will require the agreement of all 15 Commonwealth realms where the British monarch is head of state. Meanwhile, Lord Mandelson's lawyers say he was arrested over what they described as a baseless claim that he was preparing to flee the country and are demanding that Metropolitan Police release the evidence used to justify his attention. In a statement, his legal team said his overriding priority is to cooperate with the police investigation, as he has done throughout this process, and to clear his name. The former Labour peer and ex-British ambassador to the United States was detained on Monday on suspicion of misconduct in public office and released later the same evening. Police had initially planned to interview Mandelson on a voluntary basis, but changed course after assessing the alleged flight risk. He denies any wrongdoing. Zina Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Georgia is at the centre of a growing diplomatic tug of war. Western partners are urging stronger alignment against Russia, while Tbilisi insists it will not compromise national security or sovereignty under external pressure. A News correspondent in Tbilisi has more.
The British and French ambassadors to Georgia have called on the country to strengthen its role in international efforts against Russia, while firmly rejecting claims that anyone is asking Georgia to enter direct military conflict. UK Ambassador Gareth Ward said clearly that calls for Georgia to open a second front are false and part of disinformation. He stressed that Georgia's role should focus on economic and political measures, including aligning with sanctions imposed by the European Union and preventing Russia from earning revenue through oil, gas, or access to military supplies. Ward noted that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is especially relevant for Georgia, as Russian troops still occupy 20% of its territory following the 2008 war. French Ambassador Olivier Courtot reinforced that message, saying that Russia must be contained not only in Ukraine but also in other countries facing Russian pressure, including Georgia. He added that Europe remains committed to strengthening Georgia's long-term security and integration with Western institutions. These statements drew a strong reaction from Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili, who accused foreign partners of pushing policies that could escalate tensions. He argued that imposing sanctions on Russia could risk economic damage and potential military confrontation with Russia, and said that Georgia's priority is maintaining stability and protecting its population. The diplomatic disagreement comes as the EU ambassador Pavel Herchinsky recently noted that Georgia's trade with Russia has increased while the European Union reduced its own economic ties, highlighting concerns in Brussels. At the same time, divisions inside the European Union have complicated the broader sanctions strategy. German Ambassador Peter Fischer confirmed that the European Union's proposed 20th sanctions package included measures affecting Ulevi port, which is a strategic oil terminal on the Black Sea and is the part of the middle corridor linking Europe and Asia. The package was blocked by Hungary and Slovakia, two conservative EU member states considered political partners of Georgia. Fischer noted that Hungary has often supported Georgia politically inside the EU, but cautioned that Budapest alone cannot secure Georgia's European integration, underscoring the limits of bilateral alliances in a process that requires unanimous support from all member states. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
A Turkish military aircraft has crashed in western Turkey, killing its pilot. Authorities say rescue teams were deployed immediately, and both military and judicial investigations are now underway to determine what caused the incident.
A Turkish F-16 fighter jet crashed in Turkey's western Balıkesir province early Wednesday, killing its pilot, according to a statement by the National Defense Ministry. The ministry said radio contact and tracking data were lost with the aircraft shortly after it took off from the 9th Main Jet Base Command in Balıkesir at 12:56 a.m. local time. The incident occurred during what was reported as a training flight, but authorities have not yet released further details on the exact circumstances leading to the crash. Search and rescue operations were launched immediately after communication was lost, and the crash site was quickly located. According to local press reports, the aircraft crashed near the Istanbul-Izmir highway, scattering wreckage across a wide area. In its statement, the Defense Ministry confirmed that the pilot had been killed and said the cause of the accident would be determined following an investigation by an examination team. Turkish officials have expressed their condolences to the pilot's friends and family, who has since been identified as Major Ibrahim Bolat. Balıkesir Governor Ismail Ustaoğlu has expressed his sympathies. Azerbaijan's defense minister also sent a message to his Turkish counterpart, expressing his country's condolences for the death of the pilot. Meanwhile, Turkish Justice Minister Yilmaz Tunç announced that the Balıkesir Chief Public Prosecutor's Office had opened a formal investigation into the crash. He said the chief public prosecutor, a deputy prosecutor, and 2 additional prosecutors had arrived at the scene to oversee the inquiry. The investigation is expected to examine technical data, flight records, and other evidence to determine the cause of the accident. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Foreign business activity in Kazakhstan is accelerating with a noticeable shift in where investment is coming from and who is establishing a corporate presence. New official data shows a sharp rise in companies with Chinese ownership. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamazina reports.
Kazakhstan is seeing a clear increase in foreign business activity, with China emerging as the main driver of this growth. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, in 2025, the number of registered legal entities and branches with foreign ownership rose by 8%, reaching 64,000. The fastest growth came from companies with Chinese ownership. The number increased by 56% to 8,400. A similar trend was recorded for businesses from Uzbekistan, up 43% to 8,500 companies. At the same time, the presence of several traditional partners declined, with a reduced number of companies linked to Russia, Turkey, and Kyrgyzstan. This trend fits into a broader regional picture. China remains a strategic investor across Central Asia, and by mid-2025, the total volume of accumulated Chinese investment in the region reached nearly $36 billion, 1.5 times higher than in 2020. A significant share of this growth has been concentrated in Kazakhstan, which has become the largest recipient of Chinese capital, accounting for about 1/3 of the regional total. Analysts note that the investment is gradually shifting away from the raw materials sector toward manufacturing and energy. This points to a change in the nature of China's presence in the region, from primarily resource-based to more structured and long-term. Fariza Kalamazina, Almaty, A News.
Well, that is all we have for you tonight on Prime Time. Please do join us again tomorrow, though, for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.